You're listening to a 58 Ember production.
GIRLSCAMP, it's Girlscamp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girlscamp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl, and if you are navigating a faith deconstruction too, or simply fascinated by faith deconstruction journeys, by Mormonism specifically, and religion generally, then you are in the right place. Today's conversation is particularly special to me because I got to chat with the Heather Gay about her recently released book, as of yesterday, Good Time Girl. Heather is a New York Times bestselling author for her first book, Bad Mormon, and Good Time Girl is her second book. I would say it builds on and expounds on a lot of the themes that she talks about in Bad Mormon, but also introduces a lot of new themes as well. And I just loved every second of reading this book. It is so marked up. I have so many notes. I found it so relatable and so poignant and so funny. She's such a funny writer. One thing I loved about Good Time Girl is that I feel like it captured so well these niche experiences of growing up Mormon and leaving Mormonism in a way that is very, very relatable to ex-Mormons, but also in a way that I think will be really understandable and also relatable for people who have never been Mormon. And I think that that is such a gift that Heather has. I know a lot of us, myself included, really view Heather as a powerful spokesperson for ex-Mormons and ex-religious people, and particularly for ex-Mormon women, which is why I was so honored that she was willing to chat with me more about this book. Heather is also a cast member on The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and the season is currently airing, so she is incredibly busy. When we hopped on a call to talk about the book, she was currently in Miami, and it was early in the morning. It was just very, very gracious of her to find the time in this very busy season to talk about this book with not only me, but with the Girlscamp community. Because we had a bit of a time constraint, I have some more thoughts and feelings about this book that if you want to stay tuned after the conversation with Heather, I have a few quotes I want to read. Don't worry, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I just have some quotes I want to read and talk about and a couple more thoughts on the book. We're going to book club Good Time Girl just a little bit, so stay tuned for that. I also wanted to give a little bit of context because Heather and I jump right into talking about Good Time Girl. If you don't know, Heather grew up very Mormon. She did all of the Mormon things. She went on a Mormon mission, got married young in the temple, had kids fairly young, and during the height of her faith crisis in Mormonism, she actually got casted on The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and going on that show was sort of her coming out as an ex-Mormon, which is just a crazy experience. I can only imagine, and learning and reading about that was so fascinating. But that's the background on Heather in a nutshell. I would strongly recommend reading Bad Mormon and reading Good Time Girl, but just because we're diving right in, she doesn't intro herself at all, I thought I would lay that out there for anyone who doesn't know. Without further ado, here's the conversation with Heather Gay. Welcome, Heather Gay, to Girlscamp.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy you're here. I have to ask, do you have lots of girls' camp memories from growing up in the church, being a leader?
Yes, both. I have more cogent memories of being a participant, of being a camper. Absolute personality defining core memories that shaped, my social groups, my identity, my hopes and dreams, and my testimony. I mean, girls' camp, it was like Academy for testimonies. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, yep.
Finding all of the good and all of the belonging and all of the confirmation bias and all of the things. But then as a leader, it's weird. I was thinking about that because I was in Young Women's for years and did girls' camp. But I feel like there was a little bit of the shift in the way girls' camp went later in life. Mm-hmm. I don't have as many memories as a leader, and that's probably because I was disassociating a bit at that point.
Yeah, great point. I was a leader only once at Girls Camp, and I was thinking the same thing. I was trying to remember, and I'm like, I don't even really remember that much from being a leader. So I was probably disassociating too. Girls Camp is usually this really pivotal part of the Mormon upbringing. So it's fun to kind of turn that on its head with the Girls Camp podcast. And I actually want to start by talking to you about the title of your book.
Okay.
Good Time Girl. So you write about getting this nickname. There it is, Good Time Girl. We're going to be flashing this book for anybody watching.
Flashing, pun intended. And I'm wearing girls sweatshirt.
Girls everywhere.
Camp, and for the book, it's a collab.
It's a collab. There's girls. I was thinking that. I was thinking Good Time Girl and Girls Camp. This is a great crossover. Lots of good title opportunities. So you were given this nickname in a somewhat disparaging, maybe, way. And you have now reclaimed being a good time girl. And I want to hear more about what it means to you to reclaim good time girl, especially coming off of the heels of Bad Mormon being your first book and kind of leaning into the Bad Mormon stuff. So what does it mean to you now to reclaim good time girl?
Well, as you know, like the process of unpacking, you know, your religion and your faith and your like identity crisis, you go through different phases. And I think that words are so powerful, and words are really what I found has been the way for me to process, you know, my life, my memoir, my memories, and like this whole world that I've been thrust in. And I feel like words are powerful. And I felt bad when I wrote Bad Mormon. You know, I felt like it was I mean, this is the truth. I felt like it was a bad thing to do. I was a bad Mormon. I might have even felt like a bad person because my concept of what good people are was so rigidly defined and so clearly defined, you know, and probably just out of vulnerability and fear and like shame. That's who I was going to always be, is a bad Mormon. And then when Good Time Girl like was placed upon me, the name, and it's a pretty innocuous shade in terms of Housewives. You know what I mean? Like there are many worse things to be called.
It could be worse.
Prostitution, whore. I mean, we've heard it through the decades of Housewives. Good Time Girl. But I think that it triggered me and hurt me because all of a sudden, like, what I thought it was bad was really a good time, you know, and that what I wanted to be was a good time girl, and to have that word good associated with who I really was. And so now when I wrote it and realized like, holy crap, flipping the lens from not a bad Mormon, but a good time and a good time girl. And like, why was I so shamed by that, terrified by that, and afraid that anybody would ever find that out, that I was a good time.
Yeah, like that was one of the worst things, ironically, you could be, is a good time. Yeah, I was really struck by you talking about how when you were originally given that nickname, Good Time Girl, part of the sting of it was that you don't feel like you had the opportunity to fully embrace being the good time girl that maybe you kind of were inside. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of this doubly insulting thing to feel like, okay, you're using this disparagingly, but also I wish I could have been more of a good time girl. But unfortunately, Mormonism at many turns does not allow that. I want to talk more about the life unlived theme that I feel like you explore in depth in Good Time Girl. And I think that starting with that explanation of reclaiming that is so nice, because reading this book off of the heels of Bad Mormon, I actually caught up. I reread Bad Mormon. So I listened to it in your voice, and then I read all of Good Time Girl in the span of 4 days. So I feel like I got kind of just the whole back to back.
Yeah.
And it felt really empowering to read Good Time Girl, because to your point, it felt like this was a stepping into this reclamation, this confidence, this new phase for you. Mm-hmm. I want to know if that life unlived still haunts you, still bothers you? Do you have regrets around doing things that Mormon blueprint way? Have you let go of that? Tell me more about that.
I get so emotional about it because the life unlived is like, I think, the great pain of all of it for all of us, you know, because it's almost like, and Good Time Girl really touches on that, these moments in life where I felt a glimpse of who I wanted to be and who I was, and like how it could never happen. And I just chose to go back to this like preformed, you know, package. And what would my life have looked like if I had taken all of those roads not traveled? And it feels like there's a lot of like sadness and regret for who that person could have become. But because my life took all of these amazing kind of lucky twists and turns, you know, to end up having a business that was successful, you know, to end up having this show that kind of hit at the right moment where my story was even able to be told. And then I was able to write about it in a book and like have kind of power and access, not power, but access and opportunity that the Heather Gay that was the Bad Mormon never would have gotten. It feels like even more poignant for me because I'm making up for all of that lost time. You know, like I thought running into an extra from Beverly Hills 90210 at Sundance was going to be the peak of the ladder for me.
I loved that
sucked it up,
chapter,
you know?
by the way.
Right? But like, and I say so many of us because I'm really talking about like my sisters in the gospel that were steeped in this same way of life. Like there's like one of us where I'm the one starfish that got thrown back into the ocean and got to see what it would be like if all of that girl's dreams really did come true. And yeah, they're coming true when I'm old and, you know, the golden window is past and all of it, but they're happening to me now. Like I get to experience it. And I was at this Italian restaurant last night with Georgia, my daughter, and she's 18 and she was getting to figure out who she was amongst adults, amongst different elements of the world. And they were like laughing with her about her experiences at University of Miami versus mine. And I just thought, I'm so lucky that I can now give this to her because I tell you, if Housewives hadn't happened and my life hadn't been, you know, blown up in this beautiful way that it has, Georgia would be at BYU.
You think so? Wow.
I think that I would have put that pressure on her. I think I would have created the culture around it being the top school, the Harvard of the West, the place where all of the best go, where you're safe. You have like-minded, supportive people who know your history. And even if I didn't feel it, like I'm scared that my loyalty to the institution and my loyalty to the story of it all and the history of it all and the heritage of it all would have pushed my kids into that same path of them being good time girls under the wet blanket that is the honor code of BYU.
Absolutely. Wow. It's so powerful to hear you talk about that because even though I think your trajectory is unique in the sense of what your life has become with Real Housewives and all of those things, I am so struck by how relatable and resonant it is, even if that isn't the trajectory of every ex-Mormon woman's life. But having those reclamations along the way, I think you speak to so beautifully. And it's really cool to hear how your specific trajectory is what is allowing that. But then you're able to connect with so many people who don't have the exact trajectory, but can relate so deeply to so many of these themes. What has it been like for you being sort of I don't know if you consider yourself this way, but being at least in some capacity a spokesperson for ex-Mormons and especially ex-Mormon women?
I mean, I feel honored and like obligated. I'm out here doing it for y'all. And I think what you said about the trajectory is so right. Like you have to see it on a big scale to understand that you don't have to go on TV to change your life or change your children's lives or reclaim your identity or become the good time girl that's in you. It's just, you have to give yourself permission. When I meet women, ex-Mormon women and women from all kind of high demand religions and high demand families, that have very specific expectations of what women should and could be and what they should aspire to. I feel like I have a platform now. I have an opportunity. I'm able to write books. Like I want to make sure that everyone sees themselves in it and realizes that on any level, they can feel that same empowerment and freedom and permission to live shame-free.
Yes, I think you've absolutely done that. I want to read this quote speaking about the success.
Will you please turn to your Book of Mormon and page?
No, Heather, like the amount of annotations I have is crazy. So turn to page 12, verse, end of the page, third paragraph.
Okay,
You're talking about your success and how you kind of make sense of your success now. So you say, the Mormon part of me still clings to the belief that my current success and happiness are not real, that any temporary blessings are fruit from the poison tree and can never last. But I'm trying to remember that this is a lie. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I didn't get here because I betrayed my church or my family. I got here because I stopped betraying myself. I underlined that so quickly. I think a really common sentiment for ex-Mormons, ex-religious people is the devastation of realizing that in order to embrace your full self, you are going to be disappointing probably pretty significantly some of the people that you love the most. How do you navigate that disappointment? Do you still sit in that? And if not, how have you been able to kind of move through that or move on from that?
I mean, I still sit in that because it's hard to be like a hero for yourself and a traitor to the people that created the person that you were and are. And no one wants to hurt the people they love the most and also feel like, how can I ever follow this path of authenticity and happiness if I know that it takes me away from what the world and society and my heart believes is my happiness, which is this family, this, family reunion where you have to go to the church because you have so many tables and so many relatives and you can't possibly fit them all in one room. I mean, that's what I came from. And I feel like, am I missing that? And is that better than knowing who you are? And the answer is it's not. Like there's sacrifice and hardship in fighting the fight, but like the reward of embracing yourself, really. Like I used to think it was the wickedness and the shameful things that made me a bad Mormon, but the more I'm in it, I think it's like it was the ambition, and it was the drive. It was not, it's not like the drinking and the dating. That's like binary. It was the desire to like not be defined by a gendered role or by an institution that had plotted my course. Like the top of the peak was growing up was to be like Sherry Dew and get to write a book and speak at conference and be close to the prophet. That was the only woman that I thought maybe had the same type of drive that I had, and I didn't know how to channel that. And that's kind of the bad part of being a Mormon woman is sometimes having ambition and drive and wanting more for yourself. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. And it's crazy how deep that goes. That here, for me, speaking personally, on the other side of it, that is still the thing, which I don't think I fully crystallized until you laid it out that way. That is still the thing that comes up for me in such a huge way, especially being a mom, and I have young kids now. is feeling like ambition is the antithesis of motherhood, of good womanhood, it is really terrifying, especially for women who, from as far back as we can remember, had ambitions and had hopes and dreams. I'm thinking about your mission kind of randomly because I wonder, I went on a mission as well, and it was after the age change. So you went at 21, I was able to go. I went at 19. Did you feel like at that time a mission felt almost like access to that kind of ambition that usually only men are allowed to have in the church?
100%. And that's why I think it's a pretty charged, conflicted topic for a lot of us to discuss, because I was a really effective missionary. Like my RAPs, I had this companion, she's passed away, but from breast cancer, but she and they had stickers of our faces on the back of their badges, the two APs, because we historically had the most baptisms in that mission. Like, who knows how they keep their numbers, but it was a very, very difficult mission, and we had incredible success. And I felt important and powerful. I had no title, I wasn't, but I trained 8 people on my mission.
It's wild.
I'd been in France. It makes me like emotional because like you said, that was when we were like kind of given legs to run with, like I was given 6 weeks in the country, and then they said, we think you're ready to train. And that for a sister missionary is like, okay, and then I trained newbie after newbie after newbie, and I didn't have an equal companion until the last few months of my mission because I was worn out. But it was a chance for me to tap into that ambition and that work ethic and that drive to succeed. But that's also what made us diligent Mormons, because give us the rule book. How do we win the game? I'm going to do it. I'm going to pray morning, noon, and night. I'm going to make sure my kids, have the whole 9 yards, that they never miss an activity, that they never, missed the chance to be beehive president. Like I remember my dad saying to me, like the rules in my house was if I skipped seminary, the walls came tumbling down. If I skipped concert choir, they didn't even blink. And you know what I mean? It's just, it was such a different way. I knew what success looked like for my family, and it was to be a stellar Mormon, a perfect Mormon.
Yeah, that's also super interesting because I'm thinking about how the only way you had to channel your ambition was into being as good of a Mormon as you could be. That's the only path laid out for Mormon women, because Mormon men, they're allowed to be ambitious in other ways. They're even allowed somewhat to be ambitious in terms of church leadership, of being a bishop or a stake president. And it's interesting to think about how the ambition of Mormon women is channeled into sort of entrenching ourselves further into Mormonism, because the only path we see to doing things, really anything, is just by being more and more Mormon. And then I think we're seeing right now a lot of Mormon women who channeled their ambition that way leaving the church. And it's just so beautiful and so exciting to see when that ambition is unleashed outside of that box, what can happen for people.
And that's like what I hope for you and your podcast and all these other people that are out there saying, we put all of this energy and thought into throwing the best girls' camps, the best relief, the best, progression nights, or what are those, the young
personal progress.
Yes, personal progress, all of it. Like talented, powerful, moving the needle women, but more entrenched in servitude. I was Relief Society president, and that was a badge of honor for me. Like, it felt like Heavenly Father was recognizing that I needed more, but that's that messed up way of thinking. And then it keeps you further committed, because now I'm midstream. I don't have a career. I haven't really identified as anything other than a wife or mother. And now I get to be Relief Society president. So maybe I can have it both. I can be a good time girl and honor my ambition, but still stay within the confines of the church.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then it becomes even more difficult eventually to break away. Speaking about, you mentioned having like patterns of thinking, and something that really stood out to me in Good Time Girl is the chapter where you talk about your friendship with Jen Shaw. You talk about Mormonism being a training ground for denial and for mental gymnastics around reality. Did that experience with Jen Shaw help you finally break out of some of those Mormon patterns of denial and mental gymnastics?
It definitely helped. I mean, it did some heavy lifting because it externalized all of it. And it also showed me how I was personally making everything bad around me okay instead of giving myself permission to break away from it, which, is, excuses for everyone and everything in order to pretend you're safe or that, that you're loyal, and to make it a virtue signal rather than a just, self-awareness. I mean, I guess that's my answer. Yeah. Like, I still think that way. I still have mental gymnastics all the time. Like, find a way to make the preposterous seem okay. But I think that's because I was raised for my brain to think that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I was so struck by that chapter, is because you realize that even after distancing yourself from Mormonism, those thinking patterns go so deep and they can be so detrimental in all areas of your life. And I think it was really cool to read that chapter as well, because it did feel like a moment where you were able to identify that that's what was happening. And I feel like that happens in my life all the time, where I'm like, oh, this is a Mormon thing happening. This is my Mormon brain. Like, I call it my Mormon brain. I'm like, my Mormon brain is kicking in, and I'm viewing this thing in a way that I would as a Mormon, even outside of it. And so I think that the way that you wrote that all out was really, really helpful, and I think will be really beneficial for people, because unfortunately, stepping away from Mormonism doesn't just immediately turn off the Mormon brain. There's still lots of Mormonism deep in there.
Yeah. So true.
I want to read another quote from the book. This is towards the end. So we're on page 219 now.
Okay. This feels just like church, doesn't it?
I know. I'm like, okay, ladies, raise your hand if you'd like to read the scripture. This is the chapter where you're talking about beauty standards and how much there is to say about how women look. So you say, in the church, we associate beauty with happiness and success. Wickedness never was happiness is a scripture from the Book of Mormon that we often quote as an admonition to avoid sin. But the undertone feels like ugliness never was happiness. I want to know how Mormonism for you perpetuated or exacerbated beauty standards. Because obviously, I think beauty standards, that's just part of the gig, unfortunately, of being a woman in society generally. Yeah. How do you feel like Mormonism made that worse or magnified that?
Mormonism made it worse because Mormonism is a patriarchal culture where our value as women is relegated to our ability to be a good wife or mother, and the currency of a lot of that for men is beauty. And so you have beauty as the currency. So that's going to dictate how your value, how you are valued in that situation. So basically I knew, this makes me sad, but like, I knew I wasn't the belle of the ball. You know what I mean? Like the beautiful, quiet, sweet, wispy blonde that just wanted to make everyone happy. I knew that like, it wasn't just physical beauty. It was also my personality was going to bump up against a patriarchal world where if my value is service, quiet meekness, second pole position and not beautiful, then I don't really have a lot of currency. So you make up for it by being the people pleaser, by being, the first one there to clean the church, the first one to sign up for the job because I wanted to be valuable in the community, but I wasn't pretty enough to be, I had no dating life at BYU of any significance. And I used to think it wasn't because I wasn't pretty enough, but I think it's because of all of those factors made me not pretty enough.
Yeah.
So wickedness isn't happiness because wickedness isn't pretty to Mormon men either.
Oh, that's so true. How in any patriarchal system, which unfortunately that's why we deal with this in society too,
Yeah.
but you as women are reaching for ways that you can be valuable because you're just not seen as inherently valuable for existing the way that men are. And I think you're so right that growing up in the Mormon church, I felt very similarly, where it's kind of an odd thing because I think that it was always implied, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why there's a lot of things that were implied in Mormonism that once you start talking about them, people will say, well, that's not, show me the scripture that says that. But we felt it and we knew it and that was real. And it's sad how much of our, even going back to that ambition that you were talking about, how much you feel like you have to just channel into looks just because that gives you currency, like you said. I want to know how you navigate that now, because now you are a public figure, you're on TV. How much of that is still with you around the Mormonism beauty standards? How do you find a balance as it relates to beauty standards?
Well, it's interesting because I'm older now and everyone says when you get to this phase of life, it shifts for you and you stop caring as much. And that's just kind of ironic because at the time that you stop caring that much or you feel like you're in your body and you're in your looks and you know how to navigate it, you're on television where people are ripping it apart at every turn and analyzing and judging and assessing, and also I run a med spa that, caters to this and, contributes to the whole beauty standard of it all. But I feel like I think now what makes me beautiful is my resilience and is my passion, is my ambition. I wrote 2 books in 2 years, and I have 2 more in me. I think now I wish that I wasn't on TV in a way that was public so that I could just be powerful in the way that I feel most myself, which is going back through these stories, reading about those pivotal moments in my life where, I chose to betray myself and instead of, the church. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't feel the need to be beautiful and I don't feel the need to have a man. And maybe those are the 2 things that broke it for me. Because I'm independent now for the first time in my life, financially, emotionally. I'm not obligated to a husband or a church or, a family because they've estranged themselves. And that is freeing,
Totally. I want to end with a final question, asking you what it's like to be having Good Time Girl out in the world. When this episode airs, it will be as of today. What do you hope for in sharing this book specifically, Good Time Girl?
I hope for connections and conversations like this one. I hope people will read it, they'll underline something, they'll feel seen. I hope people will laugh. I think it's pretty. Did you laugh? Did you think it was funny?
Absolutely. So funny.
I like books that make me laugh out loud, but then make me just get gut punched with recognition, or something poignant. And I feel like Good Time Girl I'm really proud of it because I wrote about a lot of things that are very, very vulnerable. And because of the world I'm in, I know that some of those things will be pulled out, clickbaited, mocked, and that I told stuff that I could have gone my whole life without sharing these stories. But I felt compelled to write it. And I'm hoping that the reason I felt compelled to write it is because there's readers out there that need to hear it. And that's what I hope for.
Yeah, I can tell you from my own personal experience. I I just ate this up. And on every level, like you're saying, I was laughing about the temple name that you were given. My temple name was Tabitha, and I always thought that was pretty bad. But after reading your temple name, I was like, actually, could have been a lot worse.
Could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse. I was laughing. I was crying. I feel like you did such a good job, too, of showing the way that you chose stories from every phase of your life and just showing how the Mormonism does seep into everything. But I feel like with this book, it felt like the kind of moving through and beyond that in some ways. And that felt really encouraging for me and really inspiring for me. And there were just so many moments that I related to deeply. And I cannot wait for this to be out in the world because I know it's going to do the same for so many people. I also love how you make Mormonism so accessible to people from even outside of the faith. Like, this definitely doesn't feel like an ex-Mormon specific book. Neither did Bad Mormon. And as someone who is ex-Mormon, it feels so validating to know that more people are going to understand from whence we came, you know? And it's exciting to feel like, how can I explain to someone how something like a temple name affected my self-esteem? Like, that's a really difficult thing to describe to someone who has no idea what any of this is about. And you do it so well. And I am so excited by that too, as someone who finds a lot of value in sharing Mormonism with the world outside of Mormonism too. I could go on, but I think this book is just so phenomenal, and I'm so appreciative of you finding the time. I know it's incredibly busy right now, but to talk to me, to talk to the Girlscamp community, I feel like this book was kind of written for us. So thank you.
Well, you guys are my community. You're the only community I have, and it is. I wrote it for all of you and for all of us. We're all in this together, and like, I hope that it does bridge the gap for people to understand more of why, from whence we came, and for why we are who we are. But I mean, what you're doing is equally as important, and I just hope that we can reach a lot of people and bring them comfort the way that like connecting like this brings us.
Amen to that. We'll end with an amen.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting with me. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Heather. And like I said, I've got a few more thoughts and feelings about the book. So let's talk about it. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is in Good Time Girl, Heather has a whole chapter. It's called The H is Silent, about receiving her temple name. And I'm not going to reveal what her temple name is, although she does in the book. But I loved this chapter so much because right after I read this book, I can't remember exactly how it came up, but I was doing a Sunday check-in, which is something I do weekly on Instagram, where I just ask how people are feeling and what they're thinking. And the topic of temple names came up. For those who don't know, as a Mormon, when you are a young adult, you go through the temple and you do this temple endowment ceremony. And part of the ceremony is that you get a new secret name. And many of us were led to believe that this was very special. It was given by revelation. It's the name we're going to be called by in heaven. It's a pretty big deal. But later, for me, it was not until I left the church, I found out that the temple names are just on a rolling basis based on the day of the month. So if you go to the temple for the first time on the 6th of the month, you will be given a certain temple name. It's just very systematic and not by revelation. And I think the whole temple name thing is just so funny because it's so niche in one way, but it's also so relatable because I think it really touches on having this high expectation for something, and then many of us were disappointed by our temple name. Not all of us. If you want to look up the temple names, I can link a list in the show notes of this episode because that whole thing is really fascinating. I also do a deep dive on that, so I'll link those episodes as well. But I just wanted to quickly read this one quote from Heather about her temple name. So she's been given her name and she's experiencing disappointment, and here's what she says. This was the name God knew me as, my temple name, the only name that really mattered. It was the sacred sign and token that everyone in heaven would know me by for eternity, and it was bad. Next level bad. Like if a teacher saw the name on the roll for attendance, their bowels would be filled with compassion bad. What were the parents thinking bad? Only tradition could keep a name like this alive, and only someone cruel would willingly give it to their daughter. No loving father in heaven would bestow such a name on a girl who already felt big-boned, body, and embarrassingly white. But here I was, and he had, and I didn't know how I was going to spin it. This chapter was one of my favorites just because it was so funny. It was mostly funny and a little bit lighthearted, but it did touch on something deeper, which is the feeling that I think many of us had in Mormonism or in religion, where you are told that you are going to be seen by God, that you are going to have an experience that connects you with God in a really personal way. And a lot of religion, at least in my experience, tends to be not so personal. There's a lot of general rules, there's a lot of general messages, and to have these moments that are built into Mormonism where you get a temple name or a patriarchal blessing, those things feel like a really big deal because they are so personal. And then to be so disappointed by what you feel like God is personally seeing of you in something like a temple name, even though it's kind of silly and maybe in retrospect feels trivial, there is a deep disappointment to that. My temple name was Tabitha, and I actually was recently DMing with a Tabitha. It's kind of grown on me, the name Tabitha. At first I was not disappointed to the level that Heather was, but I was disappointed in the name Tabitha, and it's grown on me. I kind of think it's pretty cool now, honestly, but I can relate to this experience of being like, God thinks I'm a Tabitha? Why Tabitha? And now I'm going to spend my time in heaven going by the name Tabitha. I can just really relate to that feeling of, oh, this is what God thinks of me. I think Heather hits on that in a way that's super funny, but also touches on the core of that emotional disappointment that can come in the experience of a temple name, but also in many experiences throughout Mormonism or throughout religion more broadly. Another quick note on the temple names, Heather's temple name is no longer in use in the temple. I think the most recently they updated the temple name list was in 2014, I want to say. That link I'm going to link will say for sure, but they did update the names where a lot of the really objectively bad names are no longer on the list. I know a lot of people that I've talked to got the name Eunice, and they had a similar Heather experience of disappointment with that name. That name's no longer on the list. And one of my favorite names that used to be on the list for men was Nimrod. Yes, Nimrod. Many men went through the temple and were told that their special sacred name that they would be known by for all eternity was Nimrod. And that is no longer on the list as of 2014 either. But that whole thing is just a fascinating thing in and of itself. But I thought you'd all enjoy that little tidbit. Another thing that Heather writes about in a way that was so devastating is her divorce, but not only her divorce with her first husband, but the marriage itself and how difficult that marriage was because of how little they knew each other before they got married, because of the Mormon circumstances of the marriage and the patriarchy of it all. There's so much there that she writes about so well. As someone who has not experienced divorce myself, I feel like divorce is very close. Well, I guess I have. My parents got divorced. I haven't been divorced. I've been married to my husband for 8 years now. Yeah, almost 9. I have women, especially who get divorced, especially who were Mormon when they first got married, always very close to my heart because I just can't imagine what a difficult experience that would be. And I say this all the time, but my husband Bentley and I, we feel like the fact that we are still married in a lot of ways was luck of the draw. Not that we didn't put in work to improve our relationship and things like that, but the fact that we actually discovered that we really do love each other, I think was lucky because we got married after 5 months of knowing each other in this really high pressure circumstance of, in order to live together and have sex, you have to get married in the temple, all the things. And so I feel really fortunate how my journey has panned out that way. And I just know that it really ends up being, for a lot of people, luck of the draw if you are compatible with the person that you marry while in Mormonism. And Heather just talks about that in such a powerful way. This quote particularly stood out to me. This is on page 121, by the way, if you're sitting here with your books open with me. She says, "If I had known our fate, I never would have knelt down in the temple on our wedding day and pledged myself to him for time and all eternity. I would have told myself that it's better to be alone than to be misunderstood, and the hardest truths are the ones you refuse the longest to see." I really love that middle part. I would have told myself that it's better to be alone than to be misunderstood. Heather and I talked about this a little bit, but I think not only leaving Mormonism, but experiencing a divorce and now being an independent single woman is a really big deal, because there's so much in Mormonism around just being single and how important it is, how much it's drilled in our heads as Mormon women that we need to be married to a man in order to be fulfilled and happy. And I really love the way that Heather explores all of that. Again, that's not something I can speak to really from personal experience. I saw my mom as a single woman, but always within the framework of Mormonism. And then she got remarried and she is still an active Mormon. So seeing someone like Heather so proudly wear independence, I think, is really huge and really important. Okay, the last thing I want to read is in the intro, actually. And it's a quote that I have thought about a lot that I didn't get the chance to discuss with Heather. So I want to read it to you now. She says, "I sacrificed a lot to obtain the brass rings of a good Mormon life. I was abstinent till marriage, I served an 18-month mission, and I married in the temple. But try as I might to stay small and grateful, I never quite felt fulfilled. There was always a part of me that felt complete, maybe even dishonest. And it wasn't until I lost everything, my marriage, my family, my church, my community, that I recognized what that part was, the truest part of myself that I'd buried and ignored in order to fit in. Who I am at my core contradicted the person my family and church wanted me to be. Because at the end of the day, while I may have said I wanted a small, good life, if I was really honest, all I ever wanted was a big, extraordinary one." That to me is kind of what's at the core of Good Time Girl, and also at the core of many of our hearts. Anyone who's ex-Mormon or ex-religious listening, is that we tried to be grateful. We tried to do it all the way that we were told to do it, and it just never quite satisfied us. And to hear that articulated in that way was really important for me, because I don't know, I feel like that is what it is that I also tried to do all the things. I tried to do them right. And I think maybe why it was so powerful is because it showed me that there's still maybe a little kernel of shame that I wasn't just happy and grateful for what Mormonism was and for the life it laid out for me, but it wasn't everything I wanted. I wanted more and I wanted different. And I'm proud of myself and I'm proud of everyone who's broken out of that box, because it's not an easy thing to do. And I love that this community of ex-Mormonism, it feels like it's, maybe I'm biased because I'm part of it and I talk about it, but it feels like it's growing in power and there's more people talking about it and it's becoming less taboo and less stigmatized. And I just think that's such an exciting thing. And I think that Heather Gay's writing is really a big part of that. And amen. Those are my final thoughts for now on Good Time Girl. I'm sure we'll talk about it more here and there. But again, I'm just so glad that I got to talk to Heather, that I got to read this book, and I hope you all read it as well. Please share your thoughts and feelings with me about this book. I want to talk all about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I hope I see you next Wednesday on Girls Camp. In the meantime, you can follow along on Instagram, Girls Camp Podcast, on YouTube, Girls Camp Podcast, on TikTok, Haley Rawl. I also have a Patreon where I do a lot of bonus content, a couple of episodes a month, and there's a lot more community chatting. That's patreon.com/girlscamp. So please join in wherever you want to hop in. We'd be so happy to have you. Bye.
GIRLSCAMP, it's Girls Camp.
This has been a 58 Ember production. For more shows, please visit the 58 Ember channel, 58ember.com, or find us at 58 Ember Media on socials.